Chapter 2. A New Family. Abigail's mother and father didn't think John Adams. They didn't like that he came from a family of farmers. But when Abigail was almost 20 and John was almost 29, Abigail's parents changed their minds and let them marry in the Smith family. After the ceremony, they rode to their first home in nearby Braintree. It was a small salt-box house and a farm right next door to where John had been born and raised. Because it looked like a type of wooden box used to store salt in those days. The house had a sloping roof with 2 stories in the front and only 1 story in the back. John was a lawyer. He loved farming. Abigail loved being a farm wife, cooking, sewing, spinning, churning butter, milking sheep, chickens, and cows. Soon Abigail was a mother too. Nabby, Abigail. 2 years later, John Quincy was born. The Adamses hired help. But the days were still full for Abigail. She also managed to get up early or stay up late to write letters to friends and family. Even as a young girl, Abigail had loved writing letters to people close to her. Life when she stopped writing was in 1770, when their baby girl Susanna died. John often had to be away from home. He was also speaking out against British taxes that Americans had to pay. Most of all, colonists, like John Adams, were furious over the Stamp Act, which was a tax on most printed material. Abigail was left home to take charge, and she did it very well. But she was lonely. In 1768, the Adams family moved to Boston so John could be. They had a little girl, Susanna, who sadly died in 1770. She was only a year old. Both John and Abigail were broken-hearted. That same year, their son Charles was born. In 1772, they had another son, Thomas. Abigail was excited to be in big, busy Boston. There were lots of shops and were 4 newspapers. Her sister lived there, and so did Abigail's friend. British soldiers were everywhere on the lookout for trouble from the colonists. Bostonians didn't like that. Sometimes Boston felt like a dangerous place. The Adamses moved back and forth several times. Tensions were building. In protest, Americans stopped buying things taxed by the British. A tax on tea made Americans Once the tax took effect, Abigail started making her own tea from berry leaves. Lots of people were doing this. It was called Liberty Tea. In 1773, a group called the Sons of Liberty protested the tax. At a tea ship in Boston Harbor. They tossed 100 chests of tea into the water. This event became known as the Boston Tea Party, and it meant trouble. Big trouble. The Boston Massacre. In 1870, a rowdy mob started throwing ice chunks, oyster shells, and rocks at 9 British soldiers. Frightened and outnumbered crowd. 5 people were killed and others wounded. Reports of the incident, many of them including facts that were untrue, spread through the colonies. News 5 years later.